Good morning to all of you, and good afternoon to those in Turkey. My name is Frederico Martins, and I am the advisor covering economic and SME matters at EUROCHAMBRES. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third session of the EU-Turkey high-level business dialogue, being specifically dedicated to the topics of recovery, investment, and sustainable finance. I will be the moderator for this 90-minute event, and I would like to indicate some general information and some house rules. The event is being broadcasted through Zoom and also web streamed online in real time in the website of the project, as well as on social media. For those following us through Zoom, we have translations in 2 languages. And for those listening to the Turkish translation, you should choose the Korean flag for some reason. For those interested in live tweeting, the official hashtag is TEBD HLBD. Each speaker will have around 10 to 15 minutes to present their ideas, and the Q&A segment will take place after the presentations. However, I would like to invite the audience to indicate the questions in the Q&A section and the comments in the chat box as the interventions from the panelists move ahead. I will make sure to come back to them later on during the discussions. Just write down to whom the question is addressed. Otherwise, I'll consider them as general, and I'll kindly invite all the panelists to jump in. But before we move on to our panelists' interventions, I think it's important to give a short background to this session. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has posed a serious threat to European and Turkish businesses in both the short and the long term, due to disruptions in supply chains, the loss of suppliers, lower consumer confidence and demand, the lack of liquidity, and certainly the prospect of bankruptcies for many of these small businesses, unfortunately. And it is clear that companies are now facing 3 transition processes. It's the digital transformation, the move towards a more sustainable economic system, and surviving from the ongoing crisis, with the word resilience being at the center of the discussions. In the current economic climate, I think we can all agree that public and private investments should be considered as key drivers for the economic recovery. So coming back to our panelists, we have a prestigious group of speakers. First of all, Mr. Ben Butters, CEO of EUROCHAMBRES, Mr. Alban Magyar, the president of SME United, Mr. Çağrı Gürgür, the advisor to the president of the Turkish Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Mr. Carlo Monticelli, the vice governor of the Council of Europe Development Bank, or CEB. You will find more information on the speaker's background and professional experience in the website of the project. So to kick off the discussions, maybe I would like to start with you, Ben. I think it would be great if we could hear from you in terms of what the impact of the renewed confinement measures were on SMEs and the Chamber's response to mitigate unwanted consequences for small businesses. And perhaps you could also let us know what is EUROCHAMBER's positioning when it comes to EU-Turkey relations. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Federico. Pleasure to be here. Welcome, everybody. This is a very important event and a very important session within the event, and extremely timely, as I'm sure has already been mentioned. Exactly 1 year ago today, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, and we all know what has happened since. We had a meeting yesterday, an online meeting about the European Union's SME strategy, which was presented on the 10th of March 2020. And of course, the pandemic really started to hit the European economy just a few days later, and we were reflecting on the implications of the pandemic for that SME strategy. Is it still fit for purpose? Can we still base our activities to help SMEs on the assumptions before the pandemic started? And in some respects, the European Commission is very determined to maintain that approach, that strategy. They argue that SMEs are still crucial to the economy, and even though the parameters have changed massively, the objectives of the SME strategy remain valid. So from their perspective, it is a question of, I guess, recalibrating how we pursue those objectives rather than fundamentally changing the approach and the strategy. I think in broad terms, we as Eurochambers would agree with that philosophy. The building blocks remain valid. We still need to do everything we can to make sure that policies are friendly to small and medium-sized enterprises and that they help them rather than hinder their efforts to grow or indeed to survive in the current context. And to give a bit more background on the impact of the pandemic on the business community, as Federico asked, I just want to go back to our major annual economic survey, which we published 3 or 4 months ago. It's an exercise we've been doing for nearly 30 years now. And it's based on input from, this time, 60,000 businesses in 29 European countries, including Turkey, but also covering much of the European Union and several other neighboring countries. And each year we ask the entrepreneurs who answer this survey what their expectations are for the year ahead. The survey is conducted in the autumn, and the results are published towards the end of the year. So the idea is that we can tell policymakers and demonstrate to policymakers what the mood is across the European business community. And the results of the last edition of our economic survey revealed very high levels of concern for this year among businesses. They underlined the need for continuing support and swift and effective recovery measures. And this, to repeat, was a survey that was conducted in September, October 2021, before the second lockdown was really in place. But even then, there was caution and concern about 2021. And it really underlined the sharp deterioration in business confidence. And that was reflected in steep drops in all of the indexes within our survey. We asked businesses what their expectations are for sales in their national market, for international sales, for employment, for investment. And we also asked them what the major challenges will be. And on all of those indicators, the figures were very worrying. They, I guess, reflect the unprecedented nature and scale of the crisis, undoubtedly, and the fact that that has not only impacted on demand. Of course, consumer behavior has become very constrained, and we all have seen the figures about the high levels of savings. So, but it's not just that. Also, many businesses simply cannot perform the services or manufacture the goods that they would typically do because of the confinement measures. Their factories have been closed, offices have been closed as well, or are operating on very strict restrictions, and that impacts on the productivity of companies as well. So it's a double whammy from this pandemic. It's not just a drop in demand; it's also a really big impact on supply and on productivity. So that's the big challenge that we face, and that's why we need to use every tool possible to help businesses. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, we were quite critical of the European Commission for being a little bit slow, but to their credit, they responded then very quickly and pulled out all the stops, in our opinion, both in terms of macroeconomic measures that they took in combination with the EIF. But also in microeconomic terms, with the support measures that they put in place to help businesses cover fixed costs and to make sure that they remain viable despite the very testing conditions that I mentioned previously. So the Commission worked well on that aspect, and we continue to lobby on the need to maintain for as long as possible such measures during the ongoing pandemic and also probably into the post-pandemic era. But we're not yet into a post-pandemic era, I don't think. I think it's still too early to be talking about, in those terms. There are still significant restrictions in place across much of Europe. And there is, of course, the risk of new variants of the virus, and that is in the EU compounded by the slow rollout of the vaccination program, which is proving very difficult for our businesses to resume their activities. So for a lot of businesses, the approach is still very much revolving around survival rather than recovery. And it's not just the economic impact either. We should also remember the mental and emotional impact of this crisis on our entrepreneurs and on their staff. But I don't want to be too gloomy. We're getting there. There are some green shoots appearing. It's spring in Europe, and there are signs of recovery, we believe. They're still at a very early stage, but I think that the mood music is getting more optimistic. The vaccination program does remain slow, but it's beginning to accelerate, and I think businesses are gaining optimism because of that. I also wanted to talk a little bit, as Federico asked, about what chambers have been doing, apart from the work we've been doing at European level to encourage the Commission to put in place all the support measures that they can. The whole chamber network has been mobilized in response to the crisis, as you can imagine. This is really where organizations like chambers, and I'm sure President Magyar will also talk about his network as well. This is really where the business support organizations, these intermediary organizations, can demonstrate their importance and their added value to the business community. We're not just there in the good times, we're there in the bad times as well, of course, and that's when our businesses need us most, and that's when businesses need each other most. So chambers have been helping businesses talk to each other, to exchange experiences, to sympathize with each other in difficult periods as well. That's one aspect of what we're doing, which is almost a kind of moral support, I guess, to the business community. But on a more practical level, we've been providing information to businesses about the measures, about the support available, such as short-term unemployment schemes, loan guarantees, grants, and other ways to bridge the liquidity gap and to cover fixed costs that have been put in place both by European and national authorities. We've been monitoring and highlighting barriers to free movement, both of goods and of individuals, of people, and that's been a real challenge and a really important aspect of our work. The single market has been compromised, I would say, for the last 12 months in many respects. It's things that we have taken for granted for 20 or 30 years have not been the case for the last few months, because obstacles and barriers are being put in place by national authorities within the single market, with good intentions, of course, to prevent the spread of the pandemic. But the pandemic doesn't recognize and respect borders. And we have been working with the Commission and with other business organizations to highlight these obstacles and to push for them to be removed as quickly as possible where they are, in our opinion, disproportionate and problematic. To begin with, it even prevented the distribution of health equipment, which was, of course, problematic for the tackling the pandemic itself. But going on from there, it's also had a significant impact on the functioning of the single market and therefore on the economy. And those barriers, of course, have not just been within the single market, but also between the single market and neighboring economies like Turkey. So we've been working very closely with our member TOBB also to identify problems there and with other economies in the Western Balkans, the Eastern Partnership countries as well. So it's very important that we work with policymakers to identify those barriers and to try to address them as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that, I think, really reflects Eurochamber's position on EU-Turkey relations. we've been doing work in Turkey for 2 decades now. We've been involved in numerous projects to help build up the business relations between the EU and Turkey, and the current project, the Turkey-EU Business Dialogue, really builds on that legacy of the last couple of decades. And it's something that we want to continue doing. This pandemic has really underlined the importance of maximizing business relations where possible, and trying to make sure that it's as simple as possible for our for our companies to trade with other economies and between economies. If we don't have that free trade and fair trade between important economies like the EU and Turkey, then it really undermines the recovery effort. And that's something that we continue to reiterate to policymakers here. And that's why the customs union modernization is so important and really has to be pursued effectively, as swiftly and effectively as possible over the coming months. I think I'll leave it there, Federico. There's plenty more that we can cover, but I'll probably leave that for the questions and answers. Over to you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for your words, and certainly the European Union needs to reestablish the single market as soon as possible to strengthen the sustainability recovery of SMEs. I would like to move ahead to President Alban Magyar's intervention. I know that EuroChambres and SME United both messages are quite aligned when it comes to these topics, but what is SME United's view in terms of the investment and the recovery strategies, and how does this perhaps intertwine with the digital and environmental agendas of the European Union? President Magyar, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you hear me. Well, I'm very happy to join the EU-Turkey dialogue today and meet online with the SME United Turkish members as well, TESK and Turkonfed, and all the participants from Turkey and from European countries. And as you know, SME United is the association of crafts and SMEs in Europe, and represents 65 organizations, of which national SME organizations and EU sectoral federations. So as I was asked, I would like to provide you an insight in our views on the current SME business environment and point out elements on the way forward. So I will tackle 6 points plus a conclusion, and points 4 about recovery and point 6 about twin transition will be the longer ones. Perhaps if I speak too quick, let me know if it's difficult for the interpreters, and of course I thank the interpreters because it's always a difficult job. So the first point would be about the current situation. I was quite in line. I'm still quite in line with what President Butters said. Despite a slight recovery in the autumn of last year, SMEs are confronted with high uncertainty caused by unknown duration of current lockdowns and the development of the pandemic. We've been talking about vaccinations, but we have to talk about mutations as well. So we don't know how long it will last. And of course, it has to be stressed that SMEs suffer more from crisis than larger companies, especially in personal services sectors like hospitality, events, tourism, and retail, and their value chains. So that's the first point. The second point is about what SME United did throughout the crisis. Naturally, we were in continuous contact with our members' organizations. We had weekly meetings with coordinators to follow up on sanitary measures taken in the different countries and support measures designed for SMEs to get through this crisis. And additionally, we had monthly board meetings during the first lockdown to follow up on the situation across Europe. So it was very important to have information going up and down throughout the organization. The third point is of course about the crisis measures, and it has been underlined that the micro and macro reaction of the European Commission was quite good, but we do call for a continuation of crisis measures. These crisis measures, especially liquidity support, short-term work, and fixed cost compensation, have to continue as long as needed to avoid the closure of viable companies. And SMEs need support to provide required health measures like testing and sanitary protection, and they are ready to be part of this approach. And the point about those measures, the last one, is that in order to ensure supply chains and labor mobility, and it has been stated by President Butters, closures of borders and border controls should be minimized as much as possible. We have to go back to the single market as a reality. So the fourth point, which is a little longer, is about focus that should be put now on recovery and the fundamental changes ahead of us. It is clear that the long duration of crisis and different kinds of liquidity support measures have increased significantly the debt level of companies and the risk of insolvency. On average, 10% of SMEs are at a risk of bankruptcy, and this goes up to 30% for sectors most hit by the pandemic, like accommodation and events. So the situation is serious. And therefore, companies with a general positive business outlook should receive solvency support in form of grants or recapitalization. We do welcome that the European institutions and also some member states have started to prepare measures like subordinated loans, the transfer of loans into equity or semi-equity, and similar measures. At the same time, we are working on frames to support SMEs which have to restructure or have to go through an insolvency procedure by helping them to bounce back. And the early warning mechanism could be of some help. And last point about that is that we have to keep in mind that a recovery will only happen if SMEs stay able to finance investment and innovation, or if they are able to make a fresh start. That is to say, instead of talking about resilience, we would talk about bouncing back. So the fifth point would be that we have to make sure that SMEs are taken on board in the recovery plan. For this purpose, SME United organized meetings with its member organization on the next generation EU, and the process Commission and member states would follow, and on projects to be presented for investments and reforms to be implemented to allow SMEs get through this period and recover and thrive afterwards. And the sixth point is about twin transition. It will be the longest one. And to take on twin transition well, SMEs require appropriate skills, a facilitating environment, and enabling legal framework. The first topic is about the possibility for entrepreneurs and their staff to take on up and reskilling. It's about skills. So entrepreneurs have to uplift digital skills so as to integrate digital technologies and opportunities in their business model and processes. And this has been quite well done and rather quickly done by many of them during the first lockdown. Similarly, SMEs require clear and neutral information on greening possibilities to further transform their business activities in a sustainable way. So we have both transitions, that is to say, the green and the digital one. The second topic is about appropriate infrastructure. SMEs require or need investments in IT infrastructure, especially in less developed regions and rural areas. And this is basic to allow digital transformation. We are talking about broadbands and investments that might be important, but especially needed. And about investment, same is true for the appropriate energy and transport networks to allow for green transition. That is to say, local energy grids with renewable energy. Investments in energy efficiency of buildings, by the renovation wave, as it's called, is an important pillar of the Green Deal and provides huge business opportunities for SMEs, especially in the construction sector. And also a more circular economy and locally based cooperation can be driven by SMEs. And we are talking about repair and maintenance. And we know this could be very important as well. And the last topic about this twin transition is to set the right legal framework. This means providing a level playing field and reduce compliance and administrative burden to a minimum. This is constant. We want to limit red tape. And when we're talking about administrative burden, we have our concerns on the initiatives taken towards sustainable finance and taxonomy. Concerning a fair digital economy, we stress that data are a precondition to compete, and SMEs need fair access to data for this. And we are quite concerned as well about platforms, and we consider and ask for a fair treatment from platforms for SMEs. So I'm reaching, I would say, the conclusion, the seventh point that could be seen as a key message is that our economy can only recover and master the twin transition if it happens with a vibrant SME sector. Therefore, we urge all governments to focus their recovery plans and measures on allowing SMEs to get out of the crisis and to support these transitions by making the right investment and implementing appropriate reforms, that is to say, in labor market, education system, etc. This means in total providing an SME-friendly business environment where people get access to the right skills, infrastructure, and work within a correct legal setup. Well, I hope SME United Voice and all the voices that we are expressed today will be heard, and we are doing everything for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Magyar. Thank you very much for this valuable and insightful presentation. Indeed, many businesses are in need not only of liquidity and solvency measures, but also initiatives that strengthen future innovations and investments in the digital and sustainable transitions. I could not agree with you more. Let's move ahead with the next speaker, Mr. Çağrı Gürgür. Perhaps you could give us an overview in terms of how the Turkish economy and the private sector reacted to the pandemic and the importance, perhaps the importance of the sustainability of this financial system, and also how can the European Green Deal affect Turkey's growth?
Thank you, Federico. Greetings from Ankara, Turkey. I would like to thank all speakers for their valuable remarks and contributions, because each country means a different experience, a different knowledge. So sharing knowledge and experience has become more important these days. Let me start by giving some brief information about Turkish economy first, and let me start this presentation first. Wait a minute. Okay. In short, Turkish economy did better than its peers in 2020. As you can see, Turkey was one of the few countries that have a positive growth in the economy last year. In fact, in the first half of this year, last year, there was a shrinkage of nearly 10%. After that, there was a rapid recovery. Thus, 1.8% growth was achieved for the whole year. The dynamic and flexible structure of the Turkish private sector had a great effect on this result. In addition, the government has implemented a wide variety of support packages. You can see the details in the slide on the screen. All these economic stimulus packages to support the economy have reached 30 billion euros. This amount is around 5% of our national income. Expectations for 2021 and 2022 are generally positive. According to the forecasts of international institutions, especially IMF, we will continue to grow. These are the latest IMF growth projections. The IMF's latest World Economic Outlook update provides a glimmer of hope. 2020, except for some Asian countries, it is estimated that Turkey will be one of the fastest growing countries this year. First column is for 2020, the second one is 2021, and the third column is for 2022. Growth is accelerating both in the world and in the euro area this year and next year. And after ended 2020 with a contraction of 2.5% in the world, which is the worst peacetime recession since the Great Depression, IMF projects that global growth at 5.5% in 2021 and 4.2% in 2022, which reflects the positive effects of vaccination in some countries, adaptation to containment measures, and continued policy support. The improved 2021 growth outlook is largely down to advanced economies, which will grow by 4.3% thanks to, again, rapid vaccines rollout and supportive fiscal stimulus. You know, more than half of Turkey's exports are to the advanced countries. Therefore, Turkey will be affected positively. And Turkey is seen growing by 6% after having already avoided a contraction in 2020. Actually, Turkey has some strengths in this period. The epidemic showed the world the drawbacks of the supply chain being connected to a single geography, especially to Asian markets. Developed economies such as the USA and Europe are in search of alternative supply centers. They want to reduce their dependence on a single market, looking for resource diversity, and Turkey has high production capacities, strong human resources, rapid delivery performance, and dynamic entrepreneurial structure. With all these advantages, Turkey can strengthen its position as a global supply point this year and next year, we believe. Another positive development is the vaccination in Turkey. We are among the countries with the highest vaccination rates. Turkey passes 10 million mark in COVID-19 vaccination. The latest figures show that 7.6 million people were given their first dose, while another 2.4 million people have received their second dose. And the government plans to reach 50 million doses in a few months. These were the positive developments about the economy, but there are also some risky indicators. The most important of these is the CDS premium, because it means both higher interest costs and less attractive investment environment. Especially since 2018, we have been the second country with the highest risk CDS premium right after Argentina. Therefore, as TOBB, our suggestion to the government is to prioritize reform steps to reduce the CDS premium first. Above all, we need to focus on how to reduce this CDS risk level. Because the CDS level is also critical for Green Deal and its financing. With the change of economy minister and central bank president and the normalization in the monetary policy in November 2020, our CDS premium started to decline, as you can see. It continued until March, but in the last 1 or 2 weeks, it has risen slightly in parallel with the increase in US interest rates. But hopefully, if there is no another wave related to the virus, we are in a cautious optimism. We predict that the economy will bounce back to normal course this year and CDS level will decrease. So let me finish Turkey parts here and look at the general situation in the world. There are challenges and opportunities arising from the pandemic. It is now a moment of transformation to build a better future. There are already some good practices for such transformation, and for me, the best example is from a Pacific country, New Zealand. New Zealand is a country in which competent government relied on science and expertise to make decisions, and New Zealand government has managed to bring the disease under control and now is working to build the kind of economy that should mark the post-pandemic world, one that is greener and more knowledge-based. Therefore, I should mention that one possible outcome of the pandemic could be to accelerate the spread of new technologies, boosting productivity and growth. And as the world works to defeat the pandemic, countries can transform their economies to be smarter, greener, and more inclusive. We could seize these opportunities through digitalization, green economy, and free trade. Digitalization is the future. It is inevitable. We all know that. So I don't need to repeat and spend your time. But most importantly, a green economy is a must. Just as the pandemic has shown that we can no longer ignore health precautions, we can no longer afford to ignore climate change, which is the most consequential challenge facing humanity. This crisis also provides a unique opportunity to address some of the structural and strategic challenges that existed even before the pandemic, yet never received sufficient attention from us. Chief among these is how to deal with the challenge of climate change. In the last decade, direct damage from climate-related disasters adds up to around 1.3 trillion euro. If you don't like the health crisis, we will certainly not like the climate crisis. Public investments, especially in green projects and digital infrastructure, can be a game changer. They have the potential to create millions of new jobs while boosting productivity and income. So we can help our environment while boosting growth during the post-pandemic recovery. A combination of green infrastructure investments and appropriate carbon pricing and subsidies to renewables production can put us on a path towards net zero emissions by mid-century and help create millions of new jobs. This will help avoid future losses, boost growth, save lives, deliver social and environmental benefits for everyone, and create millions of new jobs. Therefore, we have a strict opportunity to build a greener world and also a more prosperous one. We need a synchronized investment program in green and digital infrastructure. Governments must put in place public investments as well as incentives for private investments that support low carbon and climate resilient growth. This could be efficient mass transit systems or smart electricity grids. Similarly, we know that the economy of the future will be digital. Related sectors have been the biggest winners of the pandemic crisis, just as that Zoom application. So countries must enable a planned transition by investing in digital infrastructure, be it e-commerce, e-learning, or e-government. At the same time, Such investment must also include support for workers as they transition from shrinking to expanding sectors. Increased investment in training, reskilling, and high-quality education will be pivotal to unlocking the potential of the digital economy. More broadly, a more fundamental rethink of how to adopt labor market policies to respond to accelerating automation and to facilitate green and digital transformations will be needed. This is an ambitious agenda, but we have once-in-a-century opportunity to build forward better. Simply returning to the carbon-based growth and high inequality economy of the past should no longer be an option. A transition toward a low-carbon growth model and future is a must. And third, we need a more fair and global trade architecture. We need to strengthen rule-based international trade because the most important poverty reduction and development tool is trade. Trade can also support a more peaceful world. Several studies show that an increase in bilateral trade interdependence significantly promotes peace. They also suggest that the peace promotion effect of bilateral trade integration is significantly higher for contiguous countries that are likely to experience more conflict. More importantly, we see that not only bilateral trade, but global trade openness also significantly promotes peace. Therefore, increasing global trade openness will reduce the probability of conflicts. A robust and inclusive economic recovery requires open and predictable international trade supported by a well-functioning trade system. Therefore, greater cooperation at the WTO can diffuse trade tensions and provide greater certainty for international trade. So the big question facing policymakers is, how can we ensure all these with a strong recovery? First, a durable recovery is only possible if we beat the pandemic everywhere. Until we defeat the pandemic everywhere, we risk new mutations that threaten our progress. Therefore, we need strong international cooperation, especially on vaccine production and distribution. How we fare over the next few months will be critical. Much of it will depend on the outcome of the race between the mutating virus and the vaccines, and on the ability of countries to provide continued support until herd immunity is achieved and recovery is fully underway. Which is why our immediate priority must be to bring the health crisis under control. The international community must act swiftly to ensure access to vaccines and medical treatments, also for low and middle income economies. IMF estimates that faster vaccinations would raise global income cumulatively by 9 trillion euro over 2020, between 2020 and 2025, with benefits for all countries. Second, we should continue support for workers and businesses until a durable exit from health crisis. A strong social protection network will be needed to cover everyone, the whole society. Until the pandemic is defeated, support for firms and households should continue. This will help protect households and prevent bankruptcies of otherwise viable firms, enabling a faster rebound once constraints are lifted. Gradual withdrawal has to follow, not to precede a durable exit from the health crisis. And third, most important over the long run is harness the response to the crisis to spur structural shifts to digitalization and greening and power up Europe's convergence engine. A coordinated green infrastructure investment push is a must. This could also boost global GDP, creating millions of new jobs. Carbon pricing can help repair fiscal balances, channel private investments into green sectors, and deliver substantial emissions reductions. Increased access to high-speed internet in rural and underserved areas will raise productivity. Education spending and job training programs will build the skills needed for a digital and green age. So we must invest more in people. It means boosting human and physical capital to underpin growth and resilience. In fact, all of them could be the start of a new positive agenda between EU and Turkey. Ironically, COVID-19 opens new prospects between the EU and Turkey. Especially the Green Deal process can be an important turning point. The green transformation process is not just a climate policy. It is also a green industry strategy that will provide economic recovery and create employment. EU is our main trading partner, and Turkey is EU's one of the most important suppliers. Productions in Turkey is critical for European supply chain. Turkish and European companies have many partnerships and joint investments. Therefore, the change in the economies of both sides will affect the other, and mutual cooperation on green transformation is essential. However, there is also a danger here. The European Union should not use the green consensus as a foreign policy instrument. The green transformation should not deepen the technology gap between the developed West and developing countries, and should not lead to deeper trenches by institutionalizing inequality, because this will trigger much bigger social and political problems. More importantly, green transformation means rapid adoption of new technologies to existing industries. In the past, the customs union with the EU has helped Turkey's economic transition into a dynamic industrial functioning market economy. It protected both Turkey and Europe from Southeast Asian competition. Now, the EU is working on renovating its existing productive capacity with new low-carbon technologies. Turkey needs to make a similar move also. So it is time to talk about Green Deal and green economy. We see it as the new model for the Turkey's economic growth and transformation. In addition to the bilateral trade and direct investments, European value chains are passing through Turkey. Therefore, Turkey needs a green transformation agenda in line with the EU Green Deal initiative. But this is a costly process. Therefore, it will be beneficial if the EU provides some financial aid to support this process, and EU will be benefited from this step also. Because in the post-COVID-19 world, the European value chains, either already operating in Turkey or the potential ones, will want to see a green transformation program in Turkey. So a green transformation program, including energy transformation and efficiency, digital transformation, and smart sustainable cities, working together with the EU's Green Deal seem to be essential. The continuation of Turkish economic and social transformation is also good for European security in general and energy security in particular. A mutual beneficial green transformation agenda appears to be a new positive agenda item between the EU and Turkey. So let me now conclude by saying that the European Union was one of the best inventions of the last century. Its values of solidarity and inclusion remain the 21st century's best hope, and 2021 will be the most important year of our lifetimes. On global scale, we are seeing a less dire contraction, but the global recovery will be long, uneven, and uncertain. If the international community can come together to help each other to get to the other side of the pandemic, we can exit this crisis with minimal economic scarring. And if we begin to solve the right seeds of investments and policies today, we can go even further and build the foundation of a 21st century economy. Therefore, policymakers will need to look beyond the immediate recovery and make sure that any measures implemented now also serve the long-term needs to help generate more inclusive, smarter, and greener growth in the future. Thank you, and I wish you all a healthy future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gürgür, for this very interesting overview of the Turkish situation and for the recommendations or suggestions that you are indicating. I would like to remind the audience that you can ask questions in the Q&A box. This will be very helpful for the session that will succeed the panelists' interventions. Picking up on the idea that how markets can mirror the sustainable developments in the real economy, I moved to Vice Governor Carlo Monticelli. I think it is clear that without the financial sector, the investment gap cannot be closed, especially not without public or institutional support from multilateral development banks such as the CEB. So I would appreciate if you could speak a little bit more about the role of these institutions and the CEB in particular, and the specific funding mechanisms that can really have an impact on SMEs' performance.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start just saying good morning and good afternoon to my fellow panelists, and most importantly to the vibrant business community, which unfortunately I'm only able to meet in this occasion via Zoom, and I of course look forward to having the opportunity to more direct contacts with all of you. The session title is quite broad. It talks about recovery, it talks about investment, it talks about sustainable finance. And international financial institutions, IFIs, and the THEBD actually have a role to play in all of these three macro areas. I will focus on sustainable finance on the asset side of the Council of Europe Development Bank, talking about the finance provided to the economy and to the SMEs. But before doing that, I would just like to flag that the ECB gives a very important support to sustainable finance also through its actions on the liability side. We have been tapping for many years now international financial markets through the use of sustainable bonds. And now I don't want to go into the details of this budding market, but it is, I believe, I strongly believe, quite an important element to reach sustainable finance, and the SEB has been playing a leading role in it. But the focus of my presentation, which I will try to keep as short as possible to leave room to the Q&A question, I would be really very happy to interact with you in the following part of the panel. And basically, I want to make 3 points. The first one is regards the importance of the SMEs for the economy in general, and at this juncture for the post-COVID recovery. I know that in a way, given my fellow panelists and the audience, this is preaching to the converted. And in fact, I will not dwell much into that. But it's important to focus on the channels through which SMEs support the economy and the recovery, because of course, the support given to them must just, in this moment, focus in particular to this channel. The second point is just to talk about what IFIs can do for SMEs. And I would like to use an adjective that, it doesn't want to sound derogatory for other players, but I want to stress that intelligent IFIs have to support these, because they can do that in a way that provides other type of support in addition to finance. The third part of my presentation, in a way, it is the most important one, given the context, and it focuses on the role of the SEB in general and the role of the SEB in Turkey to support SMEs. Now, let me share my screen to show you my presentation, which is, much shorter and, if you will, much simpler than the one of my, distinguished panelist who spoke before me. Here we go. Yeah. Let me go for the full screen. Here we are. So let me go to the first point. The first point is that medium, small, and micro enterprises are really crucial to the economy and to the post-COVID recovery. Well, the first point, the first channel...
Mr. Carlo, there is a problem with your presentation. If you wish, we would like to share it.
I am, it appears to be shared in my screen.
It is shared, but half actually, half of the screen.
Let me try again. I'm not really sure I understand what is going on. So let me start again with... what is going on? I'm not sure.
Now it works.
Yeah, okay. Good. Apologies for the inconvenience which I felt was behind my control. So the first channel through which a thriving MSME sector is supporting the recovery is that they are the engine of economic growth. SMEs drive productivity increases, innovation, and ultimately growth, long-term sustainable growth. We know that in the recovery, Schumpeter used to talk about creative destruction. The creative destruction is that because we have then a budding recovery with new technology, new ideas, and MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises are the key incubators of innovation, which ultimately, as I said, supports long-term sustainable growth. Then they are the main source of job creation. Why? Because this type of firms are labor intensive. They create jobs with a relatively small need for capital investment, for financial capital, because there is a lot of human capital invested, but this is exactly what creates job. And this is what exactly is needed after a crisis, and especially is needed now. And why? There is a third crucial channel, is that this type of enterprises are a key instrument of social cohesion. They create opportunities for women and youth much more than other types of firms do. And in a moment when the crisis was so deep that it deeply strained the social fabric, this instrument of social cohesion is particularly important and valuable. Now, let me see what is going on. Okay, yes, I moved to the second. So the key thing in highlighting what intelligent IFIs can do is that they can provide support in addition to financing. Now, I do not want to belittle the importance of financing. At the end of the day, as Mr. Major was recalling us, a high percentage of micro, small, and medium enterprises, and I would insist micro firms are on the verge of bankruptcy. And the first thing they need is breathing space provided by finance. Fair enough. So this is, of course, the needless to say contribution that multilateral development banks can give. This is crucial. But my strong claim is that this is not enough, because they can create a financial ecosystem that allows micro, small, and medium enterprise to thrive, because they have access to different type of instruments that allow financing, risk sharing, including in the participation of many actors in the financing. So we need to have a mix of equity and loans, to have guarantees, to have a capital market support, including local currency solution, having co-investment platforms. There are very many instruments. I don't want to dwell on that in these circumstances, but I want to stress that plain vanilla loans are crucial, but there are more useful financial instruments that can go pari passu with the traditional financial instruments. And then there is the area of services that must be part and parcel of the financing. Help to leverage expertise to develop a capacity has to be a joint product of financing, must be part and parcel of what IFIs do. I here quote an example in the Netherlands, an operation of ours, needless to say, where we had a very interesting project that was helping to business development services for micro entrepreneurs, helping to bridge the digital divide, which, by the way, also is an important hinder to development of micro enterprises, even in quote unquote rich countries. The multilateral development bank can help out micro enterprises, small enterprises, medium enterprises, all across the board. And they must do so. Now, of course, apologies, okay. Now, the SEB can play a full role just following the path that I have indicated for intelligent IFIs across the spectrum of loans, providing finance in difficult times, providing a broad range of financial projects, providing a broad range of tailored non-financial support. And this allows the SEB to be an effective promoter of social cohesion. Let's not forget that the key mandate of the SEB is to support social investment, to support social cohesion. And we do believe that this type of enterprise are key to obtain this objective. So the THEBD stands, I would say, as a partner of choice for post-COVID recovery. This is in general. This applies across the board. But of course, this audience, these panelists, have to be recalled that this role can be played with particularly effective vis-a-vis the Turkish medium, small, and enterprises. Why? Because we have been present in Turkey for a long time. Turkey is one of the so-called target countries, i.e. countries where our services are particularly targeted, deploying human resources and financial resources targeted to this country, targeted to Turkey, which, by the way, is by far the largest borrower and object and supported partner within the target group countries, set of countries. So the THEBD can really be a partner of choice for post-COVID recovery, and can really deploy critical resources to Turkish micro, small, and medium enterprises, with a particular focus on two types of enterprises: those that promote social cohesion, and those which promote exports. We know from 101 economics that export can be the crucial multiplier of growth in qualitative and quantitative terms. In a moment that follows a period of tensions, global tensions, following, let's put it, the approach of the previous US administration. There, trade has been hampered, created a difficult environment, and this is where there are different actors that have to play, of course, at the intergovernmental level, but the contribution that THEBD can give is to focus, while sustaining Turkish micro, small, and medium enterprises, to focus on those that have a special role in supporting export. Now, let me recap very briefly the three major points that I made. SMEs are crucial elements for the post-COVID crisis. We all knew that, but we have seen the key channels through which this support take place. The second point is that intelligence IFI can provide much more than plain vanilla financing, which, by the way, remains crucial to prevent enterprises to go bust and destroy human capital. The third point is that THEBD can be a partner of choice in helping out enterprises at this crucial juncture, particularly so in Turkey, given its THEBD's long tradition in being a partner for the Turkish micro, small, and medium enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Governor Monticelli, for this presentation and for highlighting the role that the THEBD can have for the post-COVID recovery. We've reached the Q&A segment of this event, and we have a question from the audience, and it's a question to President of SME United. What kind of cooperation can be achieved between Turkish and European SMEs in establishing an industrial symbiosis, I guess a certain sort of an SME platform? How can joint innovation projects be designed to reach European Union funds targeting SMEs?
Well, as I told you, do you hear me? Yeah, okay. When I started my speech, I said that we have two members, two Turkish members, TESK and Turkonfed. So, of course, these would be the best bridges for us to reach some of the Turkish companies that would be interested in an industrial collaboration. It was said by Mr. Butters that the SME strategy that was designed 1 year ago would not be recalibrated by the European Commission. And it appeared from the talks we had that they consider that all the measures that have been taken because of the pandemic are sufficient, and that they added as a de facto measure the resilient measures to what was the SME strategy. So, but it appears that something, and Mr. Butters may say something more, something would be done about the industrial strategy. So it means there would be no major change in the SME strategy, but some adaptations would intervene as far as the industrial strategy is concerned. So that's one point. The other point is how to get access to the European funds. And it's a question we have because, I mean, the vote has not, well, it's not easy to follow the way that funds come from Europe to member states, and then how those member states would forward them to the SMEs. So that's why we do insist that SME organizations, whether they are national or sectoral, be associated to the national recovery and resilience plans. So how can we work together? I mean, that's a big question. We have to make sure that SMEs, especially industrial ones, get access to the European funds, and that they have a kind of business model for the future. That's one point. The second point is that we do have to work on a better cooperation between European industrial SMEs and Turkish SME industry. That is to say, in what is the European frame and the frame that is, as we see today, the cooperation between European Union and Turkey. So I don't have a plain answer, but I think that the more we work together, and I congratulate you for organizing these 2 days, the better it is to have, I would say, an inside knowledge of what we can do on each side and how we can work together, because I'm sure there are partnerships to set up, and we will be very pleased to participate to this movement and to this approach.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this, for your intervention. I think that our audience is acting a bit shy, so I will ask a question maybe to Ben. I think that research shows that high debt level can slow down the recovery and economic growth. How can we guarantee that SMEs are able to deal with the repayment of debt that has been raised during the last 12 months? And looking a bit ahead, how can we achieve a better balance between bank lending, which it will always be important, and other financial instruments for SMEs?
It's another question for me.
This would be for Ben, but if you would like to
No, if it's for Ben, it's okay. Well, I think that it would be cautious now to give the floor to Ben. No, wouldn't it be?
Well, if you would like to give the floor, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll go ahead, President Magyar, and then you can maybe add something. But because I also want to answer a little bit the question that you were asked about innovation, and indeed you referred to the fact that we are expecting an updated industrial strategy from the European Commission. We understand it will be based very heavily around ecosystems, which the Commission has defined, and that within those they're trying to identify, real tangible indicators for success. So logically, any innovation initiatives between Turkish and EU companies and organizations that are seeking EU funding will probably have to revolve around those predefined parameters. We're not. I would say, as Eurochambers, we're not fully convinced by that approach yet. It's a bit risky for policymakers to be telling the economy where the potential lies. It's not an approach that has shown great success in the past necessarily historically. So I think there does need to be a bit of bottom-up, business-driven approach to this. So hopefully the officials managing these funds will bear that in mind as well. Now going on to the question that you just raised, Federico, the debt burden is indeed a big challenge. As we said, a lot of measures have been rolled out in the short term to help businesses cope with their fixed costs, their ongoing costs during the pandemic. But they can't just be, as President Magyar said, in fact, we can't just stop them overnight. Once everybody's vaccinated, the debt burden will still be there, and it has to be managed carefully, because the last thing that we want is for otherwise viable companies to be overburdened by the legacy of debt and thus dragged into bankruptcy. It's a delicate balance to find, and it's a challenge for the financial intermediaries to know which companies fit into that category and which are regrettably beyond hope. But it's the challenge that we will encounter. And as you said, the subsequent challenge will be to try and evolve from a very heavily debt-based approach to financing to a more equity-based one. It's not going to be an easy process. It's something that policymakers have been discussing for years in the institutions. But we need to provide the right mechanisms within Horizon 2020 and within the multi-annual financial framework to stimulate equity. And yeah, why not consider some kind of financial facility to underpin the risk of, to mitigate somewhat the risk of equity financing in order to stimulate the private saver, the private individuals to release some of that huge amount of saving that we've seen accumulate during the crisis. I think that's a very important aspect to releasing equity financing in the future. Your average investor in the street isn't suddenly going to be throwing thousands and thousands of euros into startups and SMEs with new initiatives. So it needs to be done effectively via intermediaries. So I think that's the route to take.
I think that Mr. Monticelli, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to chip in. First, recalling and stressing the crucial role of the banking sector in separating illiquid but viable businesses from those that regrettably are no longer viable. So this is a difficult choice. They have to make it. It is because, this assessment requires a deep knowledge of the market and of the firm itself. At the same time, other actors can really help out banks to perform this role. How? First, it's a mix of financing, and this is what Mr. Butters was making the point. You know, let's have instruments from the EU, but then you can have IFIs, and the TEBD, of course, is one of them, that can help out. First, providing banks the liquidity, the necessary liquidity to perform the role, while continue to go to do financing, which ensures that firms are alive when being assessed by banks, so to speak. But also they can help out banks just in providing a risk-sharing instrument that allowed banks to be more risk-prone, more willing, that endowed to finance enterprises than it would otherwise. So this is where an extra role can be played by various financial actors and then multilateral development banks. The third channel that multilateral development banks can use to support micro, small, and medium enterprises is exactly to help out in coping with the debt overhang, with the burden of debt incurred just to stay afloat. How? Just mixing it with other source of financing, i.e. equity. And this requires, for this change of forms of financing to take place, it requires investors willing to take this risk. Investors that must cooperate with the banking sector, because the banking sector continues to be the key sector in having a deep knowledge of the small, micro, medium enterprises. And there, once again, multilateral development banks, the TEBD in Turkey, can help out just providing financing and instruments to mitigate the risk, encourage investor to help out in this transition.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your clarification. I think we are running actually out of time. So maybe I would like to ask all the speakers if you could summarize in 60 minutes or less what could be done. This is a bit tricky, but what measure or measures would you highlight as being absolutely crucial for the recovery of SMEs? I would like to ask this to all the speakers in 60 seconds or less.
Shall I go first, Federico? I'm glad you clarified that it's 60 seconds or less, not 60 minutes or less. Otherwise, I think people would get hungry. Very briefly and very generally, I'm afraid, my message is a simple one, that we need to build the financial ecosystem and the financial mechanisms on the one hand, but on the other hand, we need to make sure that the policy environment helps businesses as well. It's useless to provide financial support if at the same time new regulations are imposing additional burdens on business and making it harder for them to pursue their activities. So we need to get that balance right. That certainly applies within the EU, and it certainly applies to EU-Turkey business relations as well. The environment for doing business has to be balanced and correct in relation not only to the financial markets, but the broader context in which businesses conduct their activities.
Thank you, Ben. President Magyar?
Yeah, I will be even shorter than Ben Butters. I said during my presentation, I hope I was not too long, that in fact SMEs need three things. It's skills, access to finance, and a legal framework that is SME friendly. I mean, these are the three major points. And perhaps there would be a moral dimension, that is to say that entrepreneurs believe in future. Normally what they do, but now they are a little lacking about anticipation and adaptation. It seems they are running out of stamina. That is my point.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gürgür?
Okay, thank you, Federico. As we said earlier, the pandemic could crystallize financial vulnerabilities that have built up over the past decade. Firms and households have taken on more debt to cope with cash shortages, adding to already high debt levels in several economies, including Turkey, and liquidity pressures may cause insolvencies if recovery is delayed. So there are two important issues here. We need more transparency and longer terms for credit payments to keep the resilience of the financial system in the long term. And more generally, authorities should better target support measures such as credit guarantees and interest payment support from central government budget, and require banks to prudently restructure loans and collect granular data on borrowers' evolving credit worthiness. Where necessary, supervisors could allow longer time frames for banks to restore their capital buffers, and when economic recovery eventually takes hold, the policy focus should shift from dealing with liquidity pressure to the gradual rebuilding of financial strength, and central bank liquidity support should be gradually withdrawn, and banks should be encouraged to take a prudent approach to recognize credit losses and rebuild capital over time, which will help real sector to recover their losses and keep their production alive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Vice Governor Monticelli.
Thank you very much. Throughout the panel, all panelists, including myself, have stressed the very many things in terms of a financial instrument policy environment that are needed to have micro, small, and medium enterprise thrive and give their contribution, their vital contribution to sustainable growth and employment creation. But the spirit of your question to me was, what are the urgent, immediate things that enterprises need? And I believe that they need three things: finance, finance, finance. Before deploying all the instruments benefiting from them, they must remain alive in an environment which, for many of them, has meant to have zero revenue for a long time, while running costs were continuing, while the dues to amortize the investment they were required to them. So there is a Latin dictum that say primum vivere deinde philosophare. So before you can think about your future, how to benefit and grow, you must be alive. And what is needed now is liquidity. And this is the first line of action. I don't want to belittle all the other instruments. I make a point that intelligence IFIs, that the TEBD have to provide other things in addition to finance. And we all panelists agree on that. But now we need to keep enterprises that face difficulties to keep them afloat. Thank you to everybody, to the audience, and I look forward to the opportunity to meet you all in person.
Thank you very much, Vice Governor, and thank you very much to all the speakers for this fascinating and valuable discussion. I hope the audience found the exchanges of views useful, and I'd invite you to direct any additional questions or comments to my colleague Oya, the manager of this project, and we'll make sure to answer them as soon as possible. The shortest time possible. In the meantime, I invite you to join the next session on circular economy happening this afternoon. In the meantime, thank you very much once again. Stay safe and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you. That was nice.
Bye-bye. Thank you.